I want to turn to the phone line right now, a friend of the program back here, and man, did he give absolutely every single Knick fan a start, to say the least, when he tweeted out 2 days ago that Isaiah Thomas was a dark horse candidate to run the Knicks and the Knicks organization, something that moments ago Isaiah Thomas tweeted out that he's not interested and he likes being at NBA TV. Frank Isola from the New York Daily News here on the show. How you doing, Frank?
Rich, I want to thank you for having me on the show with Brett Favre and John Hamm. Puts a lot of pressure on me. Everybody in your audience must be thinking, really, you're having this guy on a day when you have Brett Favre and John Hamm? So, all right, you're putting me on the spot. You're making me look bad, but I'll go for it.
No, Frank, you're looking at it the wrong way. I'm making you look good. Okay? You're on the show with those guys.
That's true.
Okay.
I saw the tweet. I was like, oh, my God. I can't believe that he put me on today.
Yeah.
You set me up, didn't you?
They're on with you, Frank. You're not on with them. They're on with you. Okay?
I guess I should look at it that. I'll eventually get you back. As for Isaiah Thomas, I do find it funny. First of all, that came from somebody in the Knicks organization, called him a dark horse candidate. Didn't say that he's going to get the job. Didn't say that he's lobbying for the job. But I did have to laugh a little bit when Isaiah sent out a tweet saying that he's not interested in the job. Is he kidding me with that one? He really came back to Madison Square Garden to run the Liberty, which I'm sure he likes doing. But I think a guy like that, considering how everything ended in New York the first time, he's been dying for another opportunity to run any team in the NBA, any of the 30 teams. Right now there's a vacancy in New York. If you go back to Jim Dolan's statement from 6 years ago when he said, I will continue to solicit Isaiah's views about basketball. He will always be a friend of mine, a friend of the organization. So to think that like Isaiah Thomas is sitting back saying, no, I'm not really going to go for it right now. Maybe the next time the job becomes available. I understand why he's doing that. He doesn't want to make it seem like, he's leaking something out or he's lobbying for it. But, I'm going to go with what this person in the organization said, that you can never rule him out and that he's a dark horse candidate.
So then where does it currently stand? Best you can tell. David Griffin is being brought in to talk about the general managership?
Yeah, I'm not even sure how far along that is. I mean, obviously he would be a candidate. My thing with the Knicks always is there always has to be some kind of connection here. And when it was Isaiah Thomas, that was Magic Johnson turning the job down and telling Steve Mills and Jim Dolan, you should hire Isaiah. Then when Donnie Walsh got the job, that was really the league kind of pushing Jim Dolan, saying, listen, hire either, I think it was either Donnie Walsh or Jerry Colanzo. Let them come in, experienced guys, well-established, let them run it. Then when it was Phil Jackson, it was Jim Dolan's relationship with Irving Azoff, the famous manager of the rock band The Eagles, who's friendly now with Jim Dolan. They're in business together. He's the one that brokered that deal with Phil Jackson. So to me, there always has to be some kind of connection. And as of right now, to me, there is no connection with David Griffin, unless maybe the Knicks are thinking, hey, somehow, some way we bring in David Griffin. Who knows? Maybe at some point we can get LeBron. I think that's a bit of a reach right now. So there always has to be a connection, and I really can't find one between the Knicks and David Griffin. Because remember, the job has been available a couple of times. Why didn't they go after R.C. Buford? That's the best in the business. The Knicks can blow everybody out of the water with an offer. So that's not to say that David Griffin can't do the job, but why not call R.C. Buford as well? So there always has to be some kind of link, and right now I can't come up with one between the Knicks and David Griffin.
Talking Knicks with the man who is the honey that brought the bees named Brett Favre, Andy Samberg, and John Hamm to this edition of the Rich Eisen Show. That would be Frank Isola here on the program. So, Frank, let's talk Carmelo, because that's the piece that actually is of national concern over the next 24 to 48 hours, unless there really is no there with Phil gone. What do you think, Frank?
Well, it's an interesting one. I think Phil Jackson was right about this. I think right now, with the way the Knicks are in their stage of development and where Carmelo is in his career, it would be best that they both split up. The problem was the way that Phil Jackson handled it and trying to kind of publicly embarrass Carmelo Anthony and give Carmelo credit. He played this one very wisely. He never spoke up in the media. He has gone completely underground since the season ended, and when all the dust settles, he's still standing here, and Phil Jackson is gone. He has a good relationship with Jim Dolan. So I think the big thing now would be, can you work out some trade? Because I think if Jim Dolan went to Carmelo and asked him, hey, let's do this, I think this would be best for both of us, I think that's something that Carmelo would listen to. But the problem is, what the Knicks fans never seem to understand is Carmelo, when you consider that contract, doesn't have that much value. It's a gigantic number. So that means you have to take back big-time salary. It's a trade kicker, so he gets an additional $8 million. His body is showing signs of slowing down. Listen, there are tons of teams in the league that will want him, but it's very difficult to make a deal on top of the fact that he has that no trade clause. So maybe at some point it'll end in a buyout. That's what Phil Jackson wanted to do. That's what Carmelo wanted, but Jim Dolan didn't want to pay basically $50 million to make one of Phil Jackson's mistakes go away when he could give Phil Jackson $24 million to make him go away. And ultimately, that's what happened.
Well, and then you wrote an excellent piece in the New York Daily News today, Frank, entitled Inside Phil Jackson's Tumultuous 3 Years as Knicks President. And I'd like you to tell some of the stories that you recounted in your piece in today's Daily News. One thing that just leapt out at me was Phil, we all know Phil wanted Steve Kerr as his first coach when he first joined the Knicks organization. And then that fell apart. I always thought because Kerr was just smart enough to stay away from that hot mess of an owner. But I'm reading in your article, James Dolan said no to Steve Kerr, wanted no part of Steve Kerr, told Phil to move on from Steve Kerr.
I think that Jim Dolan made it known that he wasn't that crazy about that hire. And you always have to remember, Steve Kerr, before he got back into the NBA, was working as an analyst with TNT.
Right.
And Marv Albert. He was kind of like a sworn enemy of Jim Dolan.
You got to be kidding me.
I'm telling you, and I think the Garden was worried. He's got, the direct pipeline like Marv Albert. A lot of things they do over there sometimes could be media-related. Now, that's not to say he's going to put his foot down and say, absolutely not, you're not doing this. But I do know this. Steve Kerr was a little bit leery about going to Madison Square Garden and working under Jim Dolan. I think Jim Dolan was a little leery of having Steve Kerr as the head coach. And eventually, think about this. They offered Derek Fisher more money than they offered Steve Kerr. So Phil's second choice got a better offer than his first choice got. What does that tell you?
And then in terms of the media strategy, you told an interesting story about when Phil was introduced and how you were not able to ask questions at his introductory press conference. Right, Frank?
Yeah. The Gardeners had this long running feud with the Daily News over a lot of things. We might have had like 6 reporters there, and I thought it was interesting. Phil got up that day. I mean, he's being introduced to the media. They did it in like the rotunda right in the front of Madison Square Garden on that March day. It was kind of cool outside. Glenn Fry, unfortunately the late, great Glenn Fry, was there at the press conference as part of kind of Phil Jackson's group. And Phil got up there and unsolicited, he brought up, kind of repairing the relationship between the organization and the media. He thought that was going to be important. So clearly people had gotten to Phil, his friends around the league and told him, listen, you got to go in there and do things the right way. But as soon as Phil finished talking, a member of the Madison Square Garden got up and he was moderating the Q&A, and he was deciding who gets to ask questions, and he never let, for example, the Daily News ask a question. So I'm thinking to myself, well, hang on a second. I mean, Phil just said 2 seconds ago about, a clean slate, repairing the relationship, and yet, the Garden is still trying to settle old scores. So by the way, that told me, you know what, he's going to have a lot of power here, but not all the power that he thinks he's going to get. And then, of course, if you remember, maybe like 2 months after that, Phil wanted to make some changes to the medical staff. And Jim Dolan told him, listen, you're in charge of the basketball operations. These medical people work for me. They're going to stay exactly where they are. So they were always – that's not to say that Jim Dolan didn't let him do a lot of things. But, when they say full autonomy, that certainly has its limits. And the other thing, which I thought was interesting, was, Phil's, dedication to the triangle. To him, when he talked about building a culture in New York, it was going to be the triangle. And last year he went to visit a free agent, and he wanted to show the player – how he wanted the Knicks to play and how he envisioned this free agent fitting in. And he was fumbling around the computer, and Steve Mills had to kind of come around there because they were sitting at this big dining room table in the player's house. And Steve Mills got the computer to work, and he actually was showing this free agent footage of the 90s Bulls and them running the triangle. And listen, Phil's had unbelievable success with the Bulls in the 90s. The game has changed just a little bit. You might have been better off showing him footage of the 2015 Golden State Warriors in the way that they play, considering they've been to 3 straight finals and won 2 of them. So I kind of think part of Phil's thing was he wanted to prove to everybody that the triangle could work. We all know it can work. It worked. It won him all those titles, but the league has also changed. And I think Phil's kind of stubbornness and unwillingness to change also hurt him in the long run.
So in the long run, now that it's over, Frank Isola, Daily News, do you think Phil failed because he was ill-equipped to do the job that he did? Or the culture of Madison Square Garden bagged another one.
Yeah, you said it, Rich. It's actually both of them. And I think for Phil Jackson, I think he believes that he's smarter than everybody. And I think when you're taking over a job like that, because you're a great coach, doesn't automatically mean you're going to be a great executive. And you really have to get your hands dirty. And look when trades are made. How many times do you see these trades being made, say, between the Spurs and the Atlanta Hawks? And then you start thinking, all right, that's right, Mike Budenholzer used to work for Greg Popovich. It's kind of a relationship business. And Phil, as a coach, he kind of liked looking down upon everybody and saying, who the heck are you guys? I'm winning all these championships. But in that kind of role, you need to have relationships with other executives. You need to, it's an ugly part of the job for a lot of executives. You have to have relationships with agents. And I don't think that's the player agents I'm talking about. And Phil never really wanted any part of that job. Everything with him was triangle. And think about it, Rich. Whenever things were going poorly for the Knicks, which was often, the thing that he always leaned on was the triangle. So when the Knicks came back from the All-Star break last year and the season's headed nowhere, he's not going to be able to make any trades, he basically tells Jeff Hornacek, we're going full-blown triangle right now, and he had players in there. He was involved in some of the drills. He always thought of himself as the coach, and the players pick up on that. You can't coach the team from your courtside seat 10 rows up right at center court. You can't do it. It's not going to work. And I think how it works, Rich, in all these jobs where guys get fired, these coaches, executives, it's never just one thing. It's always a series of things. And Phil, kind of behaving like a coach and really never embracing the job of being executive, I think that also hurt him.
Last one for you, Frank. The free agency period, as we all know, opens tonight. What do you think will be tomorrow night, Saturday night, at the top of the headline stack in NBA news? What do you think?
I think Gordon Hayward to the Boston Celtics is very real. I think Paul Millsap will be on the move from Atlanta, so that's a big name free agent. I think that Blake Griffin will return to the Clippers now that he's going to be kind of the guy. But I think the big one will be Gordon Hayward to the Boston Celtics, and I think that's why the Celtics weren't involved with Jimmy Butler. So now if Gordon Hayward ends up there, and if you're the Indiana Pacers, I still think the Pacers are sitting in a pretty good position. I understand Paul George is in his last year, but if I'm Indiana, what can I get for my best player? And the first team I'm going to call, and I don't care if they're in my conference, I'm going to call the Boston Celtics because they have all those draft picks. If you're getting rid of your best player, you're rebuilding. So you might as well get young players, draft picks. The team that has the most of them, that would be the Boston Celtics. And if I'm Danny Ainge, I'm thinking to myself, I know Paul George says that he wants to play in L.A. and all this stuff. It's Boston. We'll get him here for a year. We'll show him how great it is, how much the city loves its professional athletes here. Okay, Kevin Garnett kind of went kicking and screaming there, too, until he finally agreed to that trade, and he loved every minute of it. So maybe Boston, it'll be interesting because Danny Ainge has been taking a couple of shots since everything that happened with the draft. But, within 10 days, if he can end up with Gordon Hayward and Paul George, I think those are both certainly in play. That would look a lot different for him and the Boston Celtics.
Frank, have a great 4th of July. Thanks for calling in.
You too, Rich. Tell Andy Sandberg and John Hamm I said what's up.
You got it. That's Frank Isola, the Daily News.
The Rich Eisen Show. Weekdays at noon Eastern on radio stations across the country and audience.
If you like that video, be sure to download our app, and I'll be sure to move Week 6 games to Saturday for that wedding you have to go to.